Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto was forced to marry Hinata Part 3? The morning sun did not rise with a gentle glow, it pierced through the designer curtains of the master bedroom like a golden interrogation lamp. Naruto Namikaze, the man who could calculate the structural load of a bridge in his sleep, was currently experiencing a load-bearing crisis of a much more personal nature. He groaned, his eyes fluttering open as he felt a strange, rhythmic pressure against his cheek. It wasn't the soft touch of a silk pillow. It was firm, slightly warm, and smelled faintly of expensive lavender foot cream. Naruto squinted, his vision blurring until it focused on 5 perfectly manicured, pale toes resting directly against his nose. What the? Naruto mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. He realized with a jolt of horror that the invisible border Hinata had so fiercely established the night before had been utterly demolished. Sometime during the night, the Ice Queen had transformed into a human propeller. She was currently sprawled diagonally across the king-sized bed, her head resting where her feet should be, and her right foot was firmly planted on Naruto's face like a flag of conquest. Hinata, Naruto hissed, trying to peel her foot off his chin without triggering a lethal counterattack. You're invading. This is a violation of the treaty. Hinata let out a soft, aristocratic snort in her sleep and subconsciously flexed her toes, accidentally poking Naruto in the eye. Ow. That's it. Naruto rolled away, tumbling off the edge of the bed and landing on the plush rug with a muffled thud. The commotion finally stirred the heiress. Hinata groaned, stretching her limbs with the feline grace of a panther. Her dark hair was a wild, silken mess across the charcoal sheets. As she sat up, her silk robe, loosened by her nighttime acrobatics, slipped precariously low, revealing the pale, elegant curve of her chest. Naruto, who had just managed to stand up, found himself staring directly at the unintended display. His face didn't just turn red, it turned a shade of crimson that suggested his internal cooling system had suffered a total mechanical failure. Hinata, the robe is very loose. Naruto stammered, his hands flying up to cover his eyes, though he accidentally left a gap between his fingers. Structural integrity. We have a breach in the front panel. Hinata blinked, her sleepy brain finally registering the situation. She looked down, saw the exposure, and her eyes widened into lavender saucers. But instead of the shy apology Naruto expected, her face twisted into a look of absolute, murderous indignation. You perverted peasant, she shrieked, clutching the silk back to her throat with one hand while reaching for a heavy, feather-filled pillow with the other. Whack! The pillow caught Naruto square in the face, knocking him back toward the closet. I was just warning you. Naruto yelled, dodging a second flying pillow. I was being a gentleman. I was protecting your honor from me, I guess. Silence. Hinata barked, jumping out of bed and pointing a trembling, regal finger at the door. I do not have the temporal luxury to deal with your hormonal incompetence this morning. My pride is already bruised from sleeping in the same zip code as you. She grabbed a hairbrush from the vanity, brandishing it like a dagger. Out. Go to the kitchen and prepare my breakfast immediately. I want my poached eggs exactly 64 degrees, and if the toast is even a shade too dark, I will have your architectural license revoked for arson. Fine, I'm going. Naruto scrambled toward the door, tripping over his own discarded socks. I thought we were having a moment of shared living, but I guess the Ice Queen is back in session. And Naruto, she called out, her voice stopping him at the threshold. She stood there, silhouetted by the morning sun, looking impossibly beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Be quick. After I have dressed, I wish to smell the air outside. This apartment still smells faintly of your cheap ramen and failure. We are going for a walk, and you will be my shadow. Do you understand? Naruto let out a long, Weary sigh, but a small, hidden part of him felt a strange relief that she wasn't asking for the divorce papers again. Yes, ma'am. One shadow, coming right up. Just try not to kick me in the face while I'm making the eggs. Get out. While Naruto was in the kitchen, battling a stubborn eggshell and trying to regain his composure, Hinata was engaged in a clandestine operation in the bedroom. She reached deep into her designer handbag and pulled out a book she had purchased in a moment of extreme, late-night weakness at a 24-hour bookstore. The cover was a sickening shade of pastel pink, titled, The Radiant Heart, How to Be the Perfect Wife and Keep Your Husband Enchanted. Hinata sat on the edge of the bed, holding the book with 2 fingers as if it were a radioactive isotope. She adjusted her glasses and began to read a highlighted section. Chapter 3. The Morning Greeting, she whispered. To maintain a harmonious household, the radiant wife must greet her husband with a soft gaze and a gentle melody in her voice. Use phrases like, my heart's architect, and offer a lingering, supportive touch to his shoulder. This creates a bridge of love. Hinata's upper lip curled in pure, unadulterated disgust. A bridge of love. That is structurally unsound. It's sentimental garbage written by people who clearly don't understand the Hyuga hierarchy. She closed her eyes, practicing the soft gaze. She looked into the mirror, trying to soften her sharp, lavender eyes. She ended up looking like she had a severe case of pink eye. Soft gaze, she muttered, trying again. My heart's architect. I feel like I'm swallowing a spoonful of sugar and cyanide. Determined to prove that she could master any discipline, even wifely radiance, she stood up, smoothed her robe, and glided toward the kitchen. Naruto was hunched over the stove, humming a tuneless song, oblivious to the predatory kindness approaching from behind. Hinata entered the room. She forced her facial muscles into a shape that she hoped resembled a smile, but looked more like she was preparing to bite someone. She drifted toward him, her footsteps silent. Good morning, my heart's architect, she forced out, her voice sounding like a rusted gate trying to sing soprano. Naruto froze. He didn't turn around. His shoulders went rigid. Hinata, did you just have a stroke? Or did a ghost possess you? No, you foolish peasant, she said, her soft gaze twitching dangerously. She reached out, attempting the supportive touch. She meant to gently rest her hand on his shoulder, but her natural instincts took over. She ended up gripping his trapezius muscle with the strength of a professional wrestler. I am expressing wifely support, she hissed through her clenched teeth smile. Does it feel radiant? It feels like you're checking if my collarbone is breakable. Naruto yelped, finally turning around. He looked at her face, the squinted eyes, the bared teeth, the twitching brow. Hinata, seriously, are you okay? You look like you're trying to pass a kidney stone made of diamonds. The radiant heart within Hinata shattered into a million jagged pieces. The pastel pink advice vanished, replaced by the familiar, comforting roar of her own arrogance. That is it, she shrieked, letting go of his shoulders so hard he stumbled into the sink. I am done. This book is a work of fiction. It is propaganda designed to weaken the ruling class. What book? Naruto yelled, shielding himself with a spatula. None of your business, she barked, her eyes glowing with their usual lethal violet light. Forget the soft gaze. Forget the gentle melody. You are an annoying, clumsy, golden-headed disaster, and the only bridge I want to build with you is one that leads you directly to the stove so you can finish my eggs. She slammed her hand on the counter, the radiant wife, fully replaced by the domestic tyrant. I tried to be soft. I tried to be gentle. It was the most exhausting 3 minutes of my life. From now on, your only enchantment will be the sound of my voice telling you exactly how much you have failed at making toast. Do you understand? Naruto let out a breath of pure relief. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead and smiled. Actually, yeah, I understand this much better. Welcome back, Hinata. The stroke look was really starting to freak me out. Shut up and cook. Hinata marched out of the kitchen, muttering about how she was going to find that pink book and throw it into a woodchipper. After the disastrous, soft gaze attempt, Hinata retreated to the master bedroom for one final, desperate reconnaissance mission into the pink-covered propaganda. There must be a simpler directive, she hissed, flipping the pages of the Radiant Heart with enough force to cause a wind chill. Her eyes landed on a highlighted box in Chapter 4, the shared morsel. Nothing builds intimacy like the act of nourishment. Offer your husband a bite from your own hand. It shows vulnerability, trust, and a playful spirit. Look into his eyes as he takes the bite, and let the world melt away. Hinata stared at the page. Feeding him, like a zoo animal, or a particularly slow-witted toddler. She groaned, but the thought of the golden-haired architect, looking at her with genuine awe, instead of the confusion he'd shown earlier, was a challenge her ego couldn't ignore. Fine. I shall provide the nourishment. It is, after all, a logistical necessity. She marched back into the dining room. Naruto had just finished setting the table. He looked suspicious, his eyes darting toward the spatula as if it were his only defense. Sit, Hinata commanded. I'm already sitting, Hinata, Naruto said cautiously. The eggs are ready. They are 64 degrees. I checked with a laser thermometer. Hinata sat across from him, her posture rigid. She picked up a small piece of buttered toast with 2 fingers, holding it like a delicate surgical specimen. She remembered the book's instruction, playful spirit. She leaned forward across the table, her eyes narrowing into what she thought was a look of intimacy, but looked more like a hawk targeting a field mouse. Open your mouth, architect, she said, her voice a strained, vibrating whisper. Naruto froze, a furkful of eggs halfway to his lips. Why? Is there something on my face? Did I mess up the toast? I am offering a shared morsel, Hinata said, her hand trembling slightly from the sheer effort of not throwing the bread at him. Do not make me repeat the instruction. Open the aperture. Now. Naruto stared at the toast, then at Hinata. Hinata, you're scaring me. You look like you're trying to poison me in a way that's legal in only 3 countries. It is a vestige of vulnerability. She shrieked, her playful spirit evaporating instantly. Take the bread. She lunged forward, thrusting the piece of toast toward his face. Naruto instinctively ducked, but Hinata was a Hyuga, her reflexes were legendary. She adjusted her trajectory, but in her frantic attempt to nourish him, she didn't account for the butter. The toast slipped from her fingers just as Naruto opened his mouth to protest. Instead of a shared morsel of intimacy, the buttered side of the toast smacked Naruto directly on his forehead, slid down his nose, and landed with a wet plop into his orange juice. Silence descended upon the breakfast nook. Naruto sat there, a streak of melted butter glistening on the bridge of his nose, staring at his ruined juice. He slowly looked up at Hinata. So, Naruto said, his voice remarkably calm. Was that the trust part or the world melting away part? Because my world currently smells like sourdough and dairy. Hinata's face went through 4 different shades of purple. She looked at her empty hand, then at the butter on his nose, and finally at the pink book she had left on the counter. The bread was structurally compromised. She yelled, standing up so fast her chair screeched. The butter-to-grain ratio created a frictionless surface. It was a failure of the ingredients, not the execution. Hinata, are you trying to feed me because that book told you to? Naruto started to chuckle, reaching for a napkin. Because you're really bad at it. Like 0 out of 10, bad. You almost blinded me with breakfast. I was trying to be enchanting. Hinata screamed, throwing her hands up in the air. I was trying to show a playful spirit. But clearly, you are a man who lacks the intellectual capacity to be fed by a goddess. She snatched the orange juice glass, toast and all, and marched toward the sink. Breakfast is over. The shared morsels are cancelled. From now on, you will feed yourself like the savage you are. Wait, I'm still hungry. Eat the air. Hinata barked as she stormed out. I'm going to find my coat. We are going for that walk, and if you say the word toast while we are in public, I will have you deported. Naruto watched her go, a genuine smile breaking across his face as he wiped the butter off his nose. She's definitely back to normal, he whispered. Thank God. The park was alive with the scent of blooming cherry blossoms and the distant hum of the city, but the atmosphere around Naruto and Hinata was more like a pressurized gas tank waiting for a spark. Hinata marched down the gravel path, her head held high, her silk trench coat billowing behind her like a royal cape. In her mind, the pink book's words were flashing like a neon warning sign. Chapter 5, The Public Anchor. To signal your territory and bliss, maintain a firm, loving connection. Interlace your fingers and let the world see that you are one soul in two bodies. Architect, Hinata commanded, her voice stiff. Your hand. Give it to me. Sure, Hinata. You okay? Your eye is twitching again, Naruto said, cautiously extending his hand. Hinata didn't just take his hand, she seized it. She interlaced their fingers with the intensity of a structural bolt being torqued to its breaking point. She was trying to look radiant, but her grip was so fierce that Naruto's knuckles began to turn a ghostly white. Hinata. Ow. That's a lot of soul connection, there, Naruto winced, his fingers popping under the pressure. I think you're actually cutting off the circulation to my drafting hand. I need that for the Phoenix project. Silence. I am anchoring us. Hinata hissed, her face locked in a terrifyingly wide, frozen smile. We are projecting an image of domestic stability. Smile. You peasant. Look enchanted. I'm trying, but it's hard to look enchanted when my bones are grinding together. Suddenly, the path ahead cleared, and there she was. Sakura Haruno was standing near a stone fountain, clutching a cup of coffee as if it were a shield. Her emerald eyes widened, then narrowed into slits of pure venom as she saw the two of them, specifically, the way Hinata was practically fused to Naruto's side. The air between the two women didn't just chill, it turned into a vacuum. Hinata felt the internal struggle immediately. Her Hyuga pride screamed for her to unleash a verbal blizzard and bury the parasite right there on the gravel. But the pink book whispered, be the light. Be the radiance. Show her what she can never have through your grace. Hinata took a deep breath. She decided to be both. A radiant demon. Oh, look, my heart's architect, Hinata said, her voice dripping with a sweetness so artificial it could cause instant cavities. She turned to Sakura, her frozen smile widening. It's the little doctor. Sakura. Dear, how brave of you to be out in public so soon after your unfortunate structural collapse. Sakura's face flushed a deep, angry pink. Hinata. I see you've managed to drag Naruto out for a walk. I didn't think he was allowed to leave the apartment without a leash. Hinata giggled, a sharp, melodic sound that felt like a glass shard to the ear. She squeezed Naruto's hand even harder, causing him to let out a muffled whimper of pain. Leash. Oh, no, darling. We are simply inseparable, Hinata cooed, leaning her head onto Naruto's shoulder with a forceful thud. My husband, the master of my heart's design, simply cannot function without my proximity. He insists on it. Even at night, we find ourselves sharing the same silk sanctuary. We sleep so closely, you see. It's quite exhausting, really. Naruto's face exploded into a shade of red that rivaled a fire hydrant. Hinata. It was just one night. And there was a border. And your foot. Hush, my love, Hinata interrupted, pressing her finger to his lips while simultaneously digging her nails into his palm. She turned back to Sakura, her expression shifting from radiant to lethal in a heartbeat. Oh, but I am so terribly sorry, Sakura, Hinata continued, her voice dropping into a mocking, pitying whisper. I shouldn't talk about such intimate domestic bliss in front of you. It must be so difficult to hear, considering Sasuke never even looked at you when you shared a room, did he? I suppose some women are born to be foundations, and some are just temporary scaffolding that gets torn down once the real project begins. Hinata let out a cold, haughty laugh, looking Sakura up and down with a gaze that made the doctor feel like she was wearing rags. Poor thing. Maybe if you spent less time comforting other women's husbands and more time being substantial, you wouldn't be standing here alone with a paper cup for company. Sakura's hand trembled so much that her coffee splashed over the lid. Her eyes burned with a mixture of humiliation and absolute, unbridled rage. You arrogant, cold-hearted. Now, doctor, Hinata smiled, the radiance returning to her face like a mask. Don't raise your voice. It's bad for the acoustics of the park. Come, architect. I grow bored of the local wildlife. We have more anchoring to do. With a final, triumphant tug, Hinata dragged a completely dazed and mortified Naruto away, leaving Sakura shaking with fury by the fountain. I'm going to kill her, Sakura whispered to the wind. I am going to professionally, medically, dismantle her. As they walked away, Naruto finally managed to pry his hand loose. Hinata, that was brutal. And what was that about? Sharing a sanctuary. You're going to give the whole city the wrong idea. The only idea they need, Hinata said, her voice returning to its normal, icy perfection as she tucked the pink book deeper into her bag, is that you belong to me. Now, move faster. My feet hurt, and I want you to carry my bags for the rest of the afternoon. The park was supposed to be a place of tranquility, but for Naruto, it felt like walking through a minefield with a beautiful, high-maintenance ticking time bomb. As they strolled down the paved path, Hinata surreptitiously pulled the pink-covered book, The Radiant Heart, from her bag. She held it behind her designer clutch, her eyes scanning the pages with the intensity of a general reviewing battle plans. Chapter 6. The Playful Muse, she read under her breath. A radiant wife remains youthful and approachable. Engage with the world around you to show your husband that you possess a spirit of joy. Kindness to the innocent is the ultimate aphrodisiac for the architect's soul. Hinata's lip curled. Joy. Approachable. I am a Hyuga. I am about as approachable as a high-voltage fence. She shoved the book back into her bag with a violent zip. Just as she was adjusting her silk scarf, a blur of neon green and sticky fingers collided with her hip. A small boy, no older than 7, had run headfirst into her charcoal gray skirt, leaving a faint, dusty smudge on the priceless fabric. Hinata froze. The radiant muse vanished instantly, replaced by a dark, tectonic fury. You incoordinated miniature human. She shrieked, looking down at the smudge as if it were a lethal wound. Do you have any idea how many hours of silk weaving went into this garment? You have compromised the structural integrity of my aesthetic. The boy looked up, blinking. Behind him, 3 other children arrived, clutching a tattered, slightly deflated soccer ball. Sorry, lady, one of the girls chirped, seemingly immune to Hinata's death glare. Hey, do you want to play with us? We need a goalie because Tommy had to go home for a nap. Hinata let out a laugh that sounded like dry ice shattering. Me, play with a sphere of synthetic leather in a public dirt pit. I would rather audit the city's sewage department. Go away, you germ-bearing wanderers. Your ball is an insult to geometry. Naruto stood a few feet back, leaning against a tree, watching the scene with a mix of horror and fascination. Hinata, come on. They're just kids. Maybe a little Radiant joy, wouldn't hurt. Silence. Architect. She snapped. She turned back to the children. And you. If that ball touches my person again, I will buy this park and turn it into a private parking lot for my shoes. The children huddled together, whispering. The oldest boy, a kid with a backwards cap and a confident smirk, looked Hinata up and down. I bet she can't even kick it, he whispered loudly to his friends. She looks like she's made of glass. If she moved too fast, she'd probably break into 1,000 pieces. Yeah, the girl added, giggling. She's too fancy to be good at anything fun. She probably just sits in a chair all day being angry. Hinata's head snapped toward them, her lilac eyes glowing with a terrifying, competitive light. The insult hit her harder than any boardroom critique. I beg your pardon. Glass. Break. I'll have you know my reflexes are honed by centuries of elite lineage. I am a master of precision and force. Then prove it, lady. The boy challenged, dropping the ball at her feet. One kick. If you can hit that trash can from here, we'll believe you. But you won't. You're too afraid of getting dust on your aesthetic. Naruto straightened up, his eyes widening. Kids, I wouldn't push her. She's a bit of a perfectionist. Hinata didn't even look at Naruto. She kicked off her high heels, standing in her silk stockings on the grass. She adjusted her skirt, her face turning into a mask of pure, lethal focus. She looked at the trash can 50 feet away like it was a rival CEO she was about to bankrupt. Observe, she hissed. She took 2 steps, her legs swinging in a perfect, powerful arc. Thwack. The ball didn't just fly, it became a projectile. It streaked through the air with the speed of a heat-seeking missile, hitting the metal trash can with a sound like a gong being struck by a sledgehammer. The can fell over, rolling 3 feet away. The children stood in stunned silence. Naruto's jaw dropped so low it hit his chest. I believe, Hinata said, stepping back into her heels with effortless grace and smoothing her hair, that the glass has just shattered your expectations. Now, pick up your pathetic toy and find a different quadrant of the park to inhabit. I have a husband to manage. As they walked away, the children staring after her in awe, Naruto caught up to her, grinning. That was actually kind of amazing, Hinata. You really showed those kids. I did not do it for the children, she huffed, her face turning a slight pink as she reached for the radiant book in her bag, feeling a strange, unfamiliar surge of fun. I did it because they questioned my capacity for impact. Now, keep walking, and don't look at me like that, or I'll kick you next. The adrenaline from her soccer victory had subsided, leaving Hinata in a strange, hyper-fixated state. She marched toward a secluded wrought iron bench beneath a weeping willow, her movements as sharp as a diamond blade. She snapped open her handbag and pulled out the radiant heart for the 3rd time. Her eyes scanned the park etiquette chapter. Chapter 8. The Living Pillow. A wife's lap is the ultimate sanctuary for her weary warrior. Invite him to rest his head upon your knees. Run your fingers through his hair. This physical submission signals to the world, and to him, that he is safe in your grace. Hinata's brow flickered. A sanctuary. My silk skirt is dry clean only. But, if it signals grace. She slammed the book shut and looked at Naruto, who was currently trying to fix the strap of her handbag. Architect. Cease your fidgeting. Sit on the grass at my feet. Immediately. Naruto blinked, looking at the pristine, manicured lawn. Hinata. There are literally 2 chairs right here. Why am I sitting on the dirt? Because I have decreed it. She snapped, sitting on the bench and patting her lap with a rhythmic, slightly terrifying thud. Now, lie down. Place your golden skull upon my knees. I am providing you with a sanctuary, and you will accept it with gratitude. Naruto's face turned a shade of red usually reserved for emergency flares. What? You want me to put my head on your lap? In public? Hinata. People are walking their dogs. Sakura might be lurking behind a bush with a camera. I do not care about the local flora or the discarded doctors. Hinata hissed, reaching out and grabbing his collar, yanking him downward. Submit to the grace. Now. Naruto stumbled, his knees hitting the grass, and before he could protest further, Hinata guided his head onto her thighs. The moment his head touched her, Naruto's entire nervous system suffered a catastrophic failure. She was soft. Impossibly soft. The scent of her jasmine perfume and the warmth of her skin through the silk of her skirt was like a structural collapse of his willpower. Hinata. This is highly irregular, Naruto squeaked, his voice 2 octaves higher than usual. He tried to look up to argue, but his line of sight went directly past her chin and settled on the elegant, plunging neckline of her blouse. From this angle, the sanctuary was extremely distracting. He quickly squeezed his eyes shut, his heart hammering against his ribs like a jackhammer on a construction site. Stay still, architect, Hinata commanded. She pulled out her phone, ignoring his crisis. I have reached level 492 of Jewel Crusher, and I require total stability to complete the final sequence. For the next 10 minutes, a bizarre peace settled over them. Naruto gradually relaxed, his breathing slowing as he realized that, despite her sharp tongue, her lap really was the most comfortable place he'd ever been. He dared to open one eye, watching the sunlight filter through the willow leaves, feeling the slight vibration of her legs as she tapped frantically at her screen. Almost there, Hinata muttered, her thumbs moving with the speed of a professional pianist. One more sapphire, one more emerald. Yes. Suddenly, the Ice Queen vanished. Victory! Hinata shrieked, her voice hitting a high-frequency pitch that probably startled birds in the next city. Forgetting the living pillow, forgetting the radiant grace, and definitely forgetting the laws of physics, Hinata leapt off the bench in a burst of pure, unadulterated triumph. I have crushed the jewels. I am the sovereign of the app. Because she had launched herself forward like a rocket, Naruto, whose head was still technically anchored, was sent sprawling face first into the grass with a muffled oof. But Hinata wasn't done. In her frantic victory dance, she began hopping up and down. Crunch. Gah. My kidney. Naruto yelled as Hinata's designer heel landed squarely on the small of his back. I am unstoppable. She cheered, accidentally stepping on his hand next. Hinata. Cease. I am not a stage. I am a human being. Naruto scrambled away on all fours, looking like a panicked crab. Hinata finally froze, her phone held high in the air, a glowing, "You win" banner reflected in her violet eyes. She looked down at Naruto, who was covered in grass stains, his hair full of twigs, and his face a mask of betrayal. She cleared her throat, smoothed her skirt, and tucked her phone back into her bag with a practiced, icy nonchalance. Your sanctuary time has concluded, architect, she said, her voice returning to its regal, haughty tone as if she hadn't just been jumping on him like a trampoline. Get up. You look disheveled, and it reflects poorly on my brand. We are going to find a cafe. I require a celebratory tea. Naruto stayed on the ground for a second, staring at the sky. I think I like the Jewel Crusher, Hinata better. At least she didn't treat my spine like a dance floor. Move, peasant. The tea will not pour itself. The cafe was a masterpiece of minimalist glass and velvet, a place where the air tasted of imported vanilla and silent judgment. Naruto, still picking stray blades of grass from his sweater, followed Hinata as she glided toward a secluded booth in the back. They had been married for exactly 14 days, 2 weeks of cold glares, structural metaphors, and demon box disasters. As they sat across from each other, Hinata adjusted her silk scarf, her expression returning to that impenetrable porcelain mask. 2 lattes. One with gold leaf, one, whatever the architect drinks, Hinata commanded the waiter without looking up. Naruto leaned forward, resting his chin on his hands. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as a boss or a terrifying heiress, but as the woman who had just stomped on his kidney while cheering for a mobile game. Naruto said in an unusually low and quiet voice, "Hinata. What is it now, architect?" She snapped, not looking up from her Earl Grey. "If you are going to complain about the heel marks on your spine, I suggest you file a formal grievance with my assistant on Monday." "No, it's not like that," Naruto said, leaning forward and resting his chin on his hand. "I realized something today. We've been married for 2 weeks, and I know your favorite type of silk and exactly how you like your toast, but I don't know you. Not really. Dot dot dot. Dot dot dot." Hinata's teacup paused midway to her lips. She looked at him, her brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "I beg your pardon. I am Hinata Hyuga. My preferences are a matter of public record in the high society columns." "No." Naruto shook his head. "I mean, what do you actually like? Not what your father wants you to like. Not what the Ice Queen is supposed to like. What makes you, you?" The silence that followed was different from their usual icy standoffs. Hinata lowered her cup, her gaze shifting to the steam rising from the liquid. For a moment, the mask slipped. No one, not Sasuke, not her father, and certainly not the friends who fawned over her, had ever asked her what she liked. She was a Hyuga. She was expected to be, not to enjoy. "That is an invasive and highly irregular line of questioning," she whispered, her voice lacking its usual bite. "Come on." Naruto nudged, a small, encouraging smile on his face. "Just one thing. A secret. Something you love that no one else knows." Hinata looked around the cafe, ensuring no one from the social registry was within earshot. She leaned in, her face turning a soft, dusty rose color. I enjoy singing," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the espresso machine. "In the shower. Or when the apartment is empty. Classical opera. And occasionally, power ballads from the 80s. Naruto's eyes widened. "You. Power ballads. Like. Total eclipse of the heart. If you laugh, I will have your tongue removed," she hissed, though her blush deepened. "It is the only time I feel resonant. Without a script. Without a blueprint." Naruto didn't laugh. He looked at her with a warmth that made the Radiant Heart book look like a cheap pamphlet. "That's amazing, Hinata. Honestly. I'd really love to hear you sing sometime. I bet your voice is as beautiful as, well, as you are." The Ice Queen suffered a total system reboot. Hinata's face went from rose to a violent, glowing magenta. She gripped her spoon so hard it began to bend. You absolute, bumbling, golden-headed moron." She shrieked in a harsh whisper, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You speak such idiotic, senseless words. You don't even understand the structural weight of what you are saying. You are a peasant with no grasp of musical theory or romantic boundaries. I'm just saying you're a good singer." Naruto laughed, putting his hands up. Silence. Hinata snapped, hiding her burning face behind her silk napkin. "Your brain is made of sawdust and bad architecture. If you ever mention this, singing, to another soul, I will bury you in the foundation of your own Phoenix project. It is a secret. A sacred, Hyuga secret." "My lips are sealed," Naruto grinned, watching her try to regain her composure. "But I'm still holding out for a concert. Eat your overpriced scone and shut up, architect." The architectural firm was usually a bastion of straight lines, glass dividers, and the hushed whispers of interns. But today, the atmosphere in Naruto's private office was thick enough to clog a ventilation shaft. Hinata was standing by Naruto's desk, her hand firmly, and somewhat painfully, interlaced with his. She was practicing, Chapter 9, The Professional Anchor, from her secret book, trying to look like a supportive wife while simultaneously checking his structural calculations for the Phoenix project. Your cantilever is 2 millimeters off, architect, she murmured, her voice a mix of a caress and a court-martial. If this balcony collapses, I will personally sue your ghost. I'm fixing it, Hinata. Just, maybe let go of my thumb. I need it for the mouse. Suddenly, the heavy oak door didn't just open, it swung wide with a theatrical flourish. Standing there, clad in a garish Hawaiian shirt and sporting a mane of spiky white hair, was Jiraiya, Naruto's eccentric mentor and the city's most notorious and banned novelist. Jiraiya froze, his jaw dropping so low his chin nearly hit his chest. He looked at their joined hands, then at Hinata's flushed face, then back at Naruto's terrified expression. Miracles do exist, Jiraiya bellowed, his voice echoing through the entire floor. This is a literary masterpiece unfolding before my very eyes. The Ice Queen of the Hyuga Empire, holding the hand of a man who still eats instant ramen for breakfast. It's a tragedy. It's a comedy. It's erotic fiction in the making. Hinata snapped her hand away as if Naruto's skin had turned into molten lava. Her face went from a soft pink to a lethal, aristocratic purple. You, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the intruder. How dare you bypass my security? How dare you enter this sanctum of industry with your lurid, low-budget energy? Jiraiya ignored her, circling the desk like a vulture. Oh, Naruto, my boy. I taught you how to design buildings, but I didn't think you'd design a trap for a goddess. Tell me, does she whisper, market shares, in your ear at night? Is the silk as cold as they say, or is there a hidden boiler room in that Hyuga heart? Pervy sage, stop it. Naruto yelled, hiding behind his computer monitor. We're working. It's a domestic partnership agreement. My thumb is literally bruised. Jiraiya let out a booming laugh, wiping a fake tear from his eye. It's impossible. A Hyuga heiress, a woman who breathes liquid gold, actually loving a peasant from the common populace. A man who thinks fine dining is a burger with 2 slices of cheese. This is an insult to the caste system. It's beautiful. He is not a peasant. Hinata suddenly barked, her voice cutting through Jiraiya's laughter like a guillotine. Naruto looked up, shocked. Wait, Hinata, you're defending me. Hinata stepped forward, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. She crossed her arms, looming over the white-haired writer. Listen to me, you lecherous scribbler of bathroom stalls. Naruto Namikaze is, well, he is certainly a clumsy, disorganized, socially inept disaster with the fashion sense of a colorblind construction worker. Hey, Naruto interjected, I like this sweater. But, Hinata continued, ignoring him and glaring at Jiraiya, as long as he is working under my jurisdiction, and as long as he is legally bound to the Hyuga name, he is not a peasant. He may be a golden-headed idiot, but he is the best kind of idiot. He is a high-functioning tool of the state. He is a structurally significant asset. He is a diamond in a pile of very, very common dirt. Naruto blinked. I think I've been insulted and complimented at the same time. Is there a word for that? Insult mented. Jiraiya grinned, pulling out a small notebook and a fountain pen. Oh, this is gold. The diamond in the dirt. That's the title of my next chapter. The heiress and the high-functioning tool. The fans will go wild. I'm going to publish this on my blog by midnight. The world must know the Ice Queen has a soft spot for assets. The temperature in the room plummeted to absolute zero. Hinata's lilac eyes didn't just narrow, they began to glow with a dark, terrifying intensity. The veins near her temples throbbed, the legendary Hyuga vision of doom. You will publish nothing, she whispered, her voice sounding like ice cracking in a deep cavern. She leaned in, her face inches from Jiraiya's. If I see so much as a comma describing my domestic arrangements in your trashy stories, I will not just sue you. I will use my family's influence to have your books classified as biological hazards. I will buy your publishing house and turn it into a facility that tests the durability of industrial shredders, using you as the primary consultant. Jiraiya's grin vanished. His pen slipped from his trembling fingers. He looked into those violet eyes and saw a future involving many lawyers and a very small prison cell. I think I left my oven on, Jiraiya stammered, backing toward the door. In another city. Far away. Very far away. Run, pervy sage, Naruto yelled. She's got the radiant heart book in her bag. She's dangerous. Jiraiya bolted out the door, his Hawaiian shirt fluttering behind him as he sprinted for the elevator. Hinata took a deep breath, smoothed her hair, and turned back to Naruto. Her eyes were still glowing slightly. Now, architect, about that cantilever. If you don't fix it in the next 5 minutes, I am going to treat you with the same radiance I just showed your mentor. Naruto frantically started typing. Yes, ma'am. Fixing the balcony. No blog posts. I'm a high-functioning diamond. I got it. The walk back from the office was uncharacteristically quiet. The street lamps began to flicker to life, casting long, elegant shadows over the pavement. Hinata marched with a rhythmic, military precision, her hand still clamped onto Naruto's wrist like a high-tensile steel shackle. Architect, she said, her voice dropping into a low, meditative hum. The structural stress of dealing with your white-haired mentor has compromised my cellular equilibrium. My skin feels common. We are taking a detour. There is a private wellness sanctuary 3 blocks from here. You are coming with me. You look like you've been living in a construction site for a decade. But Hinata, I feel fine. Naruto protested, nearly tripping over a curb. I like my skin. It's rugged. It is sandpapered debris, she corrected him without looking back. Silence. They arrived at the Sakura Petal Spa, a building that looked more like a crystal palace than a clinic. The heavy oak doors swung open to reveal the manager, a girl named Mei who looked like she had stepped directly out of a high-budget shoujo anime. She had oversized, shimmering teal eyes, hair tied in 2 massive gravity-defying drills, and a tiny voice that sounded like a bell made of sugar. Welcome, Lady Hinata-sama. Mei squeaked, bowing so low her drills nearly hit the floor. The imperial suite is ready for. She stopped mid-sentence. Her teal eyes locked onto the man standing behind Hinata. Oh, my stars, Mei whispered, her cheeks turning a vivid shade of strawberry pink. Suddenly, 4 other assistants, all looking like anime background characters with sparkling eyes and tiny floating flower petals, materialized from behind the silk curtains. They swarmed toward Naruto like a school of hyperactive koi fish. Look at him, one cried, clasping her hands. His skin, it's not just white, it's like freshly fallen snow atop a mountain peak. It's translucent. It's divine. It's like alabaster mixed with moonlight. Another squealed, reaching out a trembling finger. Sir, please, may I just touch the cheek of the snow prince? Just a graze. Sign my tunic. A third yelled, thrusting a gold-inked pen at him. I need the autograph of a man with such high-definition porcelain features. How do you achieve this glow? Is it a secret serum? Is it magic? Naruto backed away, his face turning a chaotic shade of red. Guys, it's just soap, and maybe some ramen steam. Please stop poking my nose. But the girls were relentless. One was actually trying to measure the brightness of his forehead with a light meter, while another was gently pinching his arm as if checking the quality of fine china. He is a masterpiece. Mei sighed, her eyes turning into literal hearts. He is the legendary Snow Boy of our dreams. Behind them, the temperature in the spa didn't just drop, it plummeted into a permafrost. Hinata stood perfectly still. Her lilac eyes were wide, her pupils vibrating with a dark, tectonic energy. A visible purple aura, thick, jagged, and smelling faintly of ozone and impending doom, began to leak from her shoulders. The glass water features in the lobby began to crack. Step away from my acid, Hinata whispered. It wasn't a voice, it was the sound of a tectonic plate grinding against a graveyard. The girls froze. They looked at Hinata, then at the cracks forming in the floorboards beneath her heels. The floating flower petals around them turned black and shriveled instantly. He is not a snow prince, Hinata hissed, her voice rising into a terrifying, melodic roar. He is not an autograph booth. He is a highly specialized, private architectural tool that belongs to the Hyuga estate. If I see one more finger, if one more heart-shaped eye is directed at his porcelain forehead, I will buy this spa, fire everyone, and turn the massage tables into interrogation racks. She lunged forward, her hand snatching Naruto's collar with enough force to lift him an inch off the ground. We are leaving, she barked. But the facial, the snow skin treatment, May whimpered, hiding behind a marble pillar. He has enough glow to last a lifetime. Hinata shouted over her shoulder, dragging Naruto toward the exit so fast his feet were literal blurs on the carpet. As they burst out onto the street, Hinata didn't slow down. She was breathing heavily, her face a mask of possessive fury. Autographs, she muttered to herself, her grip on his arm tightening until Naruto let out a small squeak. Poking his nose, they wouldn't know quality skin if it hit them like a falling skyscraper. You are staying in the apartment for the next 48 hours, architect. I am covering you in a tarp. Hinata, you're hurting my snowy arm. Good. The apartment door didn't just close, it slammed with the finality of a courtroom gavel. Hinata was a whirlwind of silk and fury, her lavender eyes darting over Naruto as if she were inspecting a building for structural sabotage. Stand still, she commanded, her voice vibrating with a low, dangerous frequency. Hinata, I'm standing. I'm practically a statue. Naruto yelped as she snatched a silk handkerchief from her bag and began to aggressively scrub his cheek. Those commoners, she hissed, rubbing the spot where May's finger had dared to graze his snowy skin. Their touch is a contaminant. It has a specific gravity of annoying and a pH level of audacity. I will not have my legal associate smelling like cheap spa oils in desperation. She moved to his shoulder, then his arm, scrubbing as if she were trying to erase a stain from history itself. Naruto stood there, his face turning a bright, flustered pink, his heart doing a chaotic drum solo against his ribs. There, she finally huffed, throwing the handkerchief into the laundry bin with the force of a grenade. You are sanitized. Do not move from that spot. I am going to change into something less compromised. She swept into the master bedroom, the door clicking shut behind her. Naruto let out a long, shaky breath, leaning against the hallway wall. He waited, the silence of the apartment settling around him. But then, through the heavy wood of the bedroom door, a sound drifted out. It wasn't the sharp, biting tone of the Ice Queen. It wasn't a command or a critique. It was a melody. Hinata was humming. It started low, a soulful, jazz-infused vibrato that seemed to vibrate in the very air. As she moved around the room, the sound of a wardrobe opening, the rustle of silk, the humming turned into a soft, whispered song. Her voice was smoky, rich, and filled with a longing that Naruto had never heard in her speaking voice. It was a voice that didn't demand power, it shared a secret. Naruto was mesmerized. His feet moved before his brain could give the order. He walked toward the door, his hand reaching for the handle as if drawn by a magnet. He pushed it open, just a crack, his breath catching in his throat. Hinata was standing by the window, her back to him. She had discarded her trench coat and was draped in a simple, thin silk slip, her dark hair cascading down her shoulders like a waterfall of midnight. She was lost in the music, her head tilted back, singing a line about a bridge that never met the other side. Hinata, Naruto whispered, his voice thick with genuine awe. That's incredible. The melody snapped. Hinata froze. She didn't turn around. She didn't scream. She didn't reach for a pillow to throw. She simply went rigid, her shoulders tensing as if she were waiting for a blow. The silence that followed was heavy, jagged, and cold. I'm sorry, Naruto stammered, stepping into the room, his face burning with a mix of apology and admiration. I didn't mean to barge in. But your voice, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Why do you keep that a secret? Hinata finally turned, but the Ice Queen mask was gone. In its place was a raw, hollow look that made Naruto's heart ache. Her eyes were downcast, her fingers twisting the silk of her slip. Because in the Hyuga household, beauty is a currency, not a hobby, she said, her voice barely a whisper. My father, Hiashi, he told me once that a song is just a waste of breath that could be used for a command. He said that a leader doesn't sing to her people, she dictates to them. He found it weak, frivolous, a structural flaw in my character. She let out a dry, mirthless laugh. I've spent 25 years singing to the walls because the walls are the only things that don't tell me I'm wasting my time. Naruto took a step closer, his blue eyes burning with a sudden, fierce protectiveness. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers before he gently closed the distance, taking her hand in a way that wasn't about anchoring or territory. It was just Naruto. He was wrong, Hinata, Naruto said, his voice grounding and warm. He's a great businessman, sure, but he's a terrible architect of souls. Your voice isn't a flaw. It's the strongest part of you. It's the part that isn't made of contracts and ice. If you can sing like that, then you're not just a Hyuga. You're human. And you're amazing. Hinata looked up at him, her lilac eyes shimmering with unshed tears. For the first time in their 14 days of marriage, the distance between them didn't feel like a canyon. It felt like a bridge. A real, solid, structural bridge built on something other than spite. She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she leaned her forehead against his shoulder, a small, genuine sigh escaping her lips. You really are an idiot, architect, she murmured, her voice soft and tired. A clumsy, sentimental, wonderful idiot. I know, Naruto smiled, resting his chin on her head. But I'm your idiot, and I think I'd like to hear the rest of that song. The moonlight filtered through the sheer curtains of the master bedroom, casting long, silvery ribs across the floor. For the first time in 14 days, the air in the apartment didn't feel like a pressurized vacuum. The silence wasn't a weapon, it was a sanctuary. Hinata remained leaning against Naruto's shoulder, her forehead resting against the rough wool of his sweater. She could hear the steady, rhythmic thrum of his heart, a structural beat that was far more grounding than any metronome. Inside her chest, a sensation she hadn't felt since she was a small child began to bloom. It wasn't the cold satisfaction of a successful merger or the sharp pride of a Hyuga victory. It was a warm, fluttering lightness, a delicate, golden glow that seemed to soften the jagged edges of her soul. He heard me, she thought, her eyes closing tightly. He heard the part of me that doesn't exist in the ledgers. And he didn't call it a flaw. He called it a bridge. My father, Hinata began, her voice muffled against his chest, used to say that a voice is a tool of authority. If it is used for anything else, it is being squandered. He told me that a leader's silence is her greatest asset, because it makes people fill the void with their own fear. To sing, to show emotion through a melody, was to give away my power. Naruto shifted slightly, his arm moving instinctively to wrap around her shoulders. It wasn't a possessive grip, it was a protective one. That sounds like a very lonely way to build a life, Hinata. A building without windows might be strong, but nobody wants to live inside it. You've got all these windows, but you keep the shutters closed because you're afraid someone will see the light. Hinata let out a soft, shaky breath that was almost a laugh. You and your metaphors, architect. You truly see the world as a series of load-bearing walls and aesthetic choices, don't you? I see people that way, too, Naruto murmured, his chin resting atop her dark hair. And right now, I see a woman who has been carrying a skyscraper on her back and pretending it's a backpack. You don't have to be the Ice Queen in this room, Hinata. There are no cameras here. No Hiyashi. No board members. Just us. Hinata pulled back slightly, looking up at him. Her lilac eyes were wide and shimmering, the typical mask of cold perfection replaced by a raw, beautiful vulnerability. I have never told anyone about the jazz room, she confessed, her voice trembling. Not even Sakura. She would have laughed and told me to use the passion for my medical research. But you looked at me as if I had just solved the greatest engineering mystery in the world. Because you did, Naruto smiled, his blue eyes bright with a warmth that made the golden glow inside her chest expand until she felt like she might float away. You solved the mystery of why I married you. I knew there was something substantial under all that ice, Hinata. I just didn't know it was a song. A genuine, radiant smile, one that had nothing to do with the Radiant Heart book, broke across Hinata's face. It was a small, shy thing, but it lit up the room more than the moon ever could. You are incredibly persistent, Naruto, she whispered. And incredibly annoying. But, thank you for listening, for not looking for the flaw in the music. She reached up, her fingers tentatively brushing the sleeve of his sweater. Perhaps, one day, I will let you hear the full arrangement. But if you tell anyone, I will still have you deported to a remote island with no internet access. Deal? Naruto chuckled, squeezing her shoulder. I'll pack my bags just in case. They stood there for a long moment, 2 weeks of war dissolving into a single night of peace. The bridge was finally built, and for the first time, both of them were standing in the middle, looking at the same horizon. The bridge of emotions they had built the night before was still standing, but the next morning brought a new, domestic challenge. Hinata, still clutching her pink-covered, radiant heart, handbook like a sacred text, had found a new target for her redirected energy. Architect, she called out, her voice echoing through the hallway. The book specifies that a couple who labors together in the culinary arts creates a symphony of shared sustenance. We are going to perform a duet in the kitchen. Now, Naruto, who was currently trying to figure out why his coffee maker was making a sound like a dying lawnmower, looked up with a pale face. Hinata, the last time you labored in the kitchen, the microwave tried to file for a restraining order against you. Are you sure about this? I am a Hyuga. I have mastered the art of high-frequency trading and tactical negotiations. A simple marinara sauce is merely a chemical equation with a red hue. She marched into the kitchen, wearing a pristine white silk apron over her designer clothes. Naruto reluctantly followed, rolling up his sleeves. Okay. Naruto sighed, reaching for a bag of flour. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. I'll handle the dough, you handle the sauce. Just don't look at the tomatoes too aggressively. For the first 10 minutes, it was a scene of intense, awkward concentration. Hinata was treating the tomatoes like enemy combatants, dicing them with a surgical precision that was honestly a bit terrifying. Naruto was kneading dough, humming the jazz melody he'd heard her sing the night before. The book says, Hinata muttered, glancing at the pink pages propped up on a marble stand, that we should, playfully, dust each other with flour to create a sense of whimsy. She picked up a handful of flour. She didn't dust him. She threw it with the velocity of a pitcher in the World Series. Poof. Naruto was suddenly a white, powdery ghost. He blinked, flour dusting his eyelashes. Whimsy. Hinata, that was a tactical strike. The book said, playful. She defended, her eyes wide. I may have overcalculated the force to whimsy ratio. Oh, it's on, Naruto grinned, a mischievous glint in his blue eyes. He reached into the bowl and flicked a glob of pizza dough at her. It landed with a wet smack right on her forehead. Hinata gasped, her jaw dropping. You dared. You have compromised the heiress. She grabbed the nearest weapon, a bottle of olive oil and a bowl of red sauce. What followed was not a symphony of sustenance. It was a structural collapse of culinary dignity. Naruto lunged for the flour bag, Hinata countered with a spray of tomato puree. They chased each other around the kitchen island, slipping on puddles of oil, laughing and shouting. Get back here, you golden-headed disaster! Hinata shrieked, her pristine apron now looking like a crime scene. She turned a corner too fast, her silk socks hitting a patch of spilled sauce. Her feet went out from under her. Naruto. Gravity has betrayed me. Naruto dove to catch her, but his momentum was too great. He collided with her midair, and the two of them went down in a chaotic heap of limbs, flour, and red sauce. They slid across the floor, finally coming to a stop against the refrigerator. The kitchen was a total loss. Flour coated every surface like a winter storm, and red sauce was dripping from the ceiling fan. Naruto looked down at Hinata. She was pinned beneath him, her hair white with flour, a streak of red sauce across her nose, and her expensive apron ruined. He waited for the explosion. He waited for the Ice Queen to declare war. Instead, a small, choked sound escaped her throat. Hinata started to giggle. Then, it turned into a full, loud, unaristocratic belly laugh. She laughed so hard her shoulders shook, her lilac eyes bright with tears of genuine joy. We are pathetic. She gasped, pointing at Naruto's flour-covered face. Look at you. You look like a powdered donut with a crisis. Naruto joined in, his booming laughter filling the messy room. And you look like a masterpiece painted by a toddler with a grudge. They sat there on the floor, covered in the wreckage of their dinner, laughing until their ribs ached. For the first time, the Ice Queen and the peasant architect weren't a couple by contract, they were just two people who had failed spectacularly at making pizza. The ice hadn't just cracked, it had melted into a puddle of tomato sauce. The kitchen disaster had been replaced by a quiet, domestic peace. The scent of flour and tomato sauce had been scrubbed away, replaced by the calming aroma of Hinata's nighttime oils. In the master bedroom, the soft glow of a bedside lamp cast a warm amber light over the silk sheets. Naruto was sprawled across his side of the invisible border, his chest rising and falling in the deep, rhythmic breathing of a man who had finally found a sense of home. He was fast asleep, a stray lock of golden hair falling over his shut eyes. Hinata sat at her mahogany vanity, her back straight and regal even in her silk nightgown. She drew a silver-backed brush through her dark hair, the rhythmic strokes sounding like a soft whisper in the stillness. She looked at Naruto in the mirror's reflection, a small, unbidden smile softening her lips. He really is a high-functioning disaster, she thought, her eyes lingering on his peaceful face. Suddenly, her phone vibrated on the marble tabletop. The caller ID flashed a name that made the warmth in her chest turn into a block of lead, Hiashi Hyuga. Hinata's hand froze mid-stroke. She glanced at Naruto to ensure he was still asleep, then answered the phone with a voice that was instantly stripped of its newfound softness. Father, she whispered, her tone as sharp and cold as a winter morning. Hinata, the deep, booming voice of the Hyuga patriarch echoed through the line. I am calling to verify the structural integrity of this arrangement. It has been 2 weeks. Tell me, is the architect performing his duties, or is he proving to be the common distraction I predicted? Hinata gripped the brush tighter, her knuckles turning white. She looked at Naruto, the man who had defended her singing, the man who had laughed with her on a flour-covered floor. Naruto is adequate, Father, she lied, her voice steady. He is focused on the Phoenix project. Our domestic cooperation is proceeding according to the legal parameters you established. There are no deviations to report. Good. Hiyashi grunted, though he sounded unconvinced. Do not let sentimentality cloud your judgment, Hinata. Remember, this marriage is a strategic bridge, not a destination. And you will need your wits about you for tomorrow. Hinata's brow furrowed. Tomorrow. What is happening tomorrow? The Hyuga Namikaze Gala, Hiyashi declared. The board of directors, the press, and our competitors, including the Uchiha clan, will be watching. I expect a perfect display of unity. If there is so much as a crack in your happy couple facade, the merger will be compromised, and I will reconsider Naruto's position in this company, and this family. I understand, Father, Hinata said, her heart sinking. We will be perfect. See that you are. Good night, Hinata. The line went dead. Hinata slowly set the phone down, her hand trembling. She looked back at the mirror. The Ice Queen was staring back at her, but behind the violet eyes, there was a flicker of genuine fear. Tomorrow was a stage. Tomorrow, they had to prove to the world, and to her father, that they were a perfect match, or Naruto would lose everything she had worked so hard to help him build. She turned around in her chair, watching Naruto sleep. He looked so innocent, so unaware of the storm her father was brewing. She walked over to the bed and, for the first time without a radiant heart instruction, she reached out and gently brushed that stray lock of hair from his forehead. You have no idea what's coming, architect, she whispered, her voice cracking. But I won't let him break you. The sun had barely kissed the skyline of the city when the tranquility of the master bedroom was shattered. Hinata didn't believe in gentle alarms or the soft smell of coffee to wake a person. She believed in tactical efficiency and the sudden removal of comfort. Rip. With one violent, decisive motion, Hinata seized the edge of the silk duvet and yanked it completely off the bed. Naruto, who had been dreaming of a giant bowl of ramen that doubled as a structural marvel, was suddenly exposed to the freezing blast of the air conditioning. Architect. Battle stations. Hinata barked, her voice echoing like a drill sergeant's in a cathedral. Naruto curled into a shivering ball on the mattress, his eyes squeezed shut. 5 more minutes, the broth isn't ready yet. The broth is irrelevant. Reality has arrived. Hinata marched to the side of the bed and clapped her hands loudly next to his ear. Clap, clap, up. Every second you spend in a state of unconsciousness is a second the Hyuga reputation withers. Naruto bolted upright, his hair standing in 10 different golden directions. He blinked blearily at Hinata, who was already fully dressed in a sharp, midnight blue power suit, her hair tied back in a ponytail so tight it looked like it could deflect bullets. Hinata, he croaked, rubbing his eyes. Is the building on fire? Is the demon box attacking again? Worse, Hinata said, throwing a thick, heavy folder onto his lap. Tonight is the Hyuga Namikaze Gala. My father called. The board of directors, the shareholders, and every vulture in the architectural industry will be there to dissect our marriage under a microscope. If we fail to project absolute, impenetrable unity, he will liquidate your firm before dessert is served. Naruto stared at the folder, then at the clock. It's 6:15 a.m. The party isn't until tonight. Can't we discuss this over? I don't know, consciousness. No. Hinata grabbed his arm and hauled him out of bed with a strength that defied her slender frame. Today is not a work day for you, Naruto. Today, you are my project. You are a piece of raw marble that I must carve into a husband capable of standing next to me without tripping over his own shadow. She dragged him toward the walk-in closet, which had been transformed overnight. A fleet of rolling racks held dozens of suits, shirts, and ties, all organized by thread count and color temperature. We have exactly 12 hours, Hinata said, her eyes scanning the racks with predatory intensity. Phase 1 is grooming. Phase 2 is the public affection, choreography. Phase 3 is the memorization of the guest list. You will not eat anything that causes bloating, and you will certainly not mention the word ramen within a 5-mile radius of the ballroom. Naruto looked at a lime green tie she was holding against his chest. Hinata, you're scaring me. You've got that look in your eyes again, the one you had when you kicked that soccer ball into the trash can. Because this is the ultimate match, Naruto, Hinata said, her voice softening for just a fraction of a second as she adjusted his collar with trembling fingers. My father is looking for a crack in the foundation. He wants to prove that I made a mistake. That we are a mistake. She looked him in the eye, her lilac gaze fierce and desperate. I will not let him be right. Now, put on the charcoal pinstripe. We are going to practice your confident husband walk until your legs ache. But I haven't had breakfast. Naruto wailed. You will have a protein shake in the cold realization of our social stakes. Hinata snapped, shoving him toward the dressing area. Move, architect. The Empire is watching. Naruto sighed, catching a glimpse of himself in the mirror, messy, confused, and utterly overwhelmed. But as he looked at Hinata, who was currently organizing silk pocket squares by shade, he realized she wasn't just being bossy. She was protecting him. All right, Naruto muttered, unbuttoning his pajama top. Let's build this perfect couple bridge. Just try not to break my ribs with the corset, or whatever you're planning to wrap me in. It's a tuxedo, you peasant. Now stand straight. The transformation of Naruto Namikaze from a high-functioning disaster into a Hyuga standard gentleman required more than just a closet full of clothes, it required a tactical invasion of the city's most exclusive shopping district. Hinata, please. My legs have reached their structural limit. Naruto wailed, his heels skidding across the polished marble floor of the Grand Quartz Mall. Hinata didn't even look back. Her hand was clamped onto his wrist like a hydraulic vice, her stride purposeful and terrifyingly fast. Nonsense, architect. You spend all day standing over drafting tables. Consider this a vertical endurance test. We have precisely 4 hours before the tailor arrives, and your current wardrobe is a humanitarian crisis. I like my orange hoodie. It has character. It has a soy sauce stain from 2024 and smells like desperation. Hinata snapped, swiping her platinum card to open the glass doors of Lilite Masculine, a boutique so expensive the air inside tasted like mountain-filtered oxygen and snobbery. The moment they entered, 3 stylists in charcoal suits bowed so low they practically did somersaults. Lady Hyuga, an honor. And this must be the project. It is a renovation, Hinata corrected, spinning Naruto around like a spinning top. He is fundamentally sound, but the exterior cladding is a disaster. I need fabrics that scream sovereign wealth, but whisper, I don't try too hard. Begin the assault. Before Naruto could protest, Hinata began patrolling the racks with the speed of a heat-seeking missile. Too beige. Too trendy. This looks like something a cruise ship magician would wear, she muttered, snatching hangers and throwing them over her shoulder toward Naruto. Flap. A navy blazer landed on Naruto's head. Thwack. A pair of silk trousers hit his chest. Whip. A crisp white shirt slapped him in the face. Hinata. Stop throwing things. I'm not a laundry basket. Naruto shouted, struggling to emerge from a pile of high thread count wool. Silence, mannequin. Hinata barked, holding up a velvet dinner jacket that cost more than Naruto's first car. She marched over and shoved him toward the dressing room with a forceful shove to the small of his back. Enter the chamber. Put on the charcoal pinstripe first. If I see a single wrinkle, I will make you do it again while reciting the Hyuga family lineage. 10 minutes later, Naruto stumbled out, fumbling with a button. This shirt is so tight I can't breathe. Is this fashion or an assassination attempt? Hinata walked around him, her eyes narrowed into lethal slits. She reached out, her fingers flying as she adjusted his collar, her face inches from his. For a second, the Ice Queen facade flickered as she saw the way the sharp lines of the suit defined his shoulders. It's called, tailored, you peasant, she whispered, her voice softening for a fleeting second before she tightened his tie with a sharp yank that made him turn blue. It's meant to show that you are a man of substance. My father needs to see a pillar of the community, not a pile of golden-headed fluff. I think I liked it better when we were covered in flour, Naruto gasped, clutching his throat. Laughter is for the kitchen, Naruto. Tonight, we wear the armor of the elite. She stepped back, admiring her handiwork with a predatory smirk. You look passable, almost like someone I wouldn't sue for standing too close to me. Wow, Hinata, that's the nicest thing you've said all morning. We still have to find shoes that don't squeak. Move. She grabbed his wrist again, dragging him toward the footwear section while Naruto let out a long, dramatic groan that echoed through the silent, expensive halls. The shopping expedition had transitioned from a tactical invasion into a full-scale logistical nightmare. Naruto was no longer a man, he was a walking, breathing leaning tower of luxury cardboard. He was buried under a mountain of glossy black and silver shopping bags, stacked so high that his golden hair was the only thing visible above the rampart of Hyuga-approved fashion. In his arms, he balanced 3 oversized shoe boxes, 2 garment bags, and a mysterious cylindrical case that Hinata claimed held essential grooming architecture. Hinata, my center of gravity is compromised. Naruto wheezed, his voice muffled by a bag from a boutique that sold socks for the price of a small car. I'm an architect. I understand load-bearing walls. And I am telling you, my spine is about to reach its structural failure point. Hinata marched 2 paces ahead, her heels clicking with the rhythmic precision of a ticking time bomb. She didn't even look back, her eyes scanning the storefronts with the predatory focus of a hawk hunting for the perfect pocket square. Nonsense, Naruto, she snapped, her voice cool and crisp. The weight of those boxes is a physical manifestation of your rising social status. Consider it a workout for your posture. A Hyuga man does not slouch, even when burdened by the requirements of elegance. I'm not slouching. I'm folding, Naruto protested, nearly colliding with a marble pillar as a box of Italian leather loafers slipped an inch to the left. Why do I need 4 different types of white shirts? They're all white. It's the same color, Hinata. It's the absence of color. Hinata stopped abruptly, turning on her heels so fast Naruto had to perform a frantic, wobbling dance to avoid crushing her under a landslide of silk. She reached out, tapping one of the boxes with a manicured finger. They are not white, you uncultured peasant. One is Arctic mist, one is ivory bone, and the third is alabaster silk. To wear Arctic mist at a gala with ivory lighting is a visual catastrophe that would haunt my dreams for a decade. It's a shirt, Hinata. Not a blueprint for a skyscraper. It is the blueprint of your soul. She countered, her eyes narrowing. She leaned in, her face inches from his pile of boxes. And you still need the final component. I've noticed a catastrophic lack of structural scent. I showered. I use the soap you bought that smells like a frozen forest. That was morning utility scent, Hinata sighed, reaching into her bag for her phone to check the map for a boutique that sold bespoke fragrances. For the gala, you require something that suggests old money with a hint of I have never once eaten instant ramen in my life. You need the Midnight Mahogany cologne. It costs more than your monthly rent, but it smells like a man who understands the nuances of a hostile takeover. Naruto groaned, the boxes in his arms creaking. Can we just go home? My arms are vibrating. I think my muscles are trying to resign. We go home when the silhouette is complete. Hinata declared, spinning back around and resuming her march. Pick up the ivory bone box, Naruto. It's tilting. If that silk touches the floor, I am adding another hour of waltz practice to your schedule. No, not the waltz. Anything but the waltz. Naruto scrambled to readjust his mountain of luxury, his sneakers squeaking on the marble as he chased after the retreating silk trench coat of his wife. Wait for me. The Arctic mist is slipping. The apartment's living room had been cleared of all furniture, leaving a vast, polished floor that felt more like a battlefield than a ballroom. Hinata stood in the center, already dressed in her rehearsal gown, a sprawling, midnight violet masterpiece with a train that seemed to go on for miles. Architect. Position, she commanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Naruto, dressed in his stiff new tuxedo, stumbled forward. He felt like a wooden puppet. Hinata, I'm telling you, my feet don't do graceful. They do running away from things and climbing scaffolding. This is a disaster waiting to happen. Silence. The waltz is a structural dialogue between two bodies, Hinata declared, seizing his right hand and placing his left hand firmly on her waist. You are the foundation. I am the spire. Do not let the spire collapse. 1 2 3, 1 2 3. They began to move. For the first 10 seconds, it was a miracle. Naruto managed to keep rhythm, his eyes locked onto Hinata's chin to avoid looking at the floor. But then, Hinata executed a complicated reverse turn. The vast sea of violet silk from her skirt swirled around Naruto's ankles like a hungry tide. Keep the pace, architect. Do not look down. I'm trying, but your dress has a mind of its own. Naruto gasped. As they pivoted, Naruto's heavy dress shoe landed squarely on the delicate, shimmering train of Hinata's gown. There was a sickening RRRIIP of expensive fabric. My silk, Hinata shrieked. The sudden resistance of the fabric acted like a tripwire. Naruto's momentum continued forward while his foot stayed pinned to the floor. He let out a panicked, "Whoa!" and lunged forward to regain his balance, but instead, he caught his other foot in the lace. Gravity, the one force an architect should always respect, took over. Naruto went down hard, and because he was still holding onto Hinata's waist, he dragged her down with him. They hit the polished floor with a muffled thud. Naruto landed face first, but his fall was cushioned by something incredibly soft, warm, and scented like jasmine. He realized with a jolt of pure electricity that his face was buried directly into the plunging, silk-clad neckline of Hinata's bodice. For 3 seconds, the world stopped spinning. Naruto froze, his breath hitching, the warmth of her skin making his brain short-circuit into a pile of static. Then, the volcano erupted. Get off me! Hinata's scream was less of a shout and more of a sonic boom. She shoved him back with a force that sent him skidding 3 feet across the floor. She sat up, her hair a wild nest of dark silk, her face a shade of crimson that suggested her internal pressure was reaching terminal levels. You uncoordinated, gravitational catastrophe. She barked, clutching her bodice and adjusting her torn dress. You have not only compromised the structural integrity of a custom-made French gown, but you have violated the personal sanctuary of a Hyuga. It was an accident, Naruto yelled, scrambling backward on his hands and knees, his face glowing like a neon sign. The floor was slippery. Your dress is a hazard. It's basically a purple rug designed to kill people. A rug? This is art. Hinata stood up, her eyes glowing with that terrifying violet light. She pointed a trembling finger at the door. You are a menace to society. You are a walking demolition crew. I try to provide you with radiant grace, and you respond by attempting to smother yourself in my chest. I wasn't attempting to smother. I was falling. You fell with suspicious accuracy. Hinata shrieked, grabbing a nearby throw pillow and launching it at his head with the velocity of a cannonball. Go to the kitchen. Go eat your processed noodles. I cannot look at your golden-headed face while my dignity is in ruins. Naruto ducked the pillow and scrambled toward the hallway. Fine. But for the record, the foundation, thinks the spire is way too top-heavy for dancing. Out. As Naruto bolted for safety, Hinata sat back down on the floor, looking at her torn dress and her flushed reflection in the window. Her heart was hammering, not just from anger, but from the lingering heat of the moment. She huffed, crossing her arms. Stupid architect, she whispered, her face still burning. Stupid, clumsy, soft-headed idiot. The chaos of the afternoon had settled into a heavy, electric silence. The torn rehearsal gown had been whisked away by frantic assistants, replaced by the actual masterpiece intended for the gala. Hinata stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the foyer. She was a vision of lethal elegance. Her gown was a structured column of midnight silk that shimmered like oil on water, with a sheer, high-collared neckline that paid homage to her heritage while remaining cutting edge. Her hair was swept up into an intricate, architectural knot, held in place by silver pins that caught the light like stars. She turned her gaze to Naruto, who was standing stiffly by the door. Architect, come here, she commanded, her voice soft but firm. Naruto approached, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. He was wearing the Arctic Mist shirt and the charcoal pinstripe tuxedo they had fought over in the boutique. The fit was hauntingly perfect. It carved out his shoulders and leaned out his frame, making him look less like a scrappy designer and more like the man who owned the skyline. Hinata stepped into his space. The scent of her jasmine and the midnight mahogany cologne mingled in the small gap between them. She reached up, her slender fingers moving with a grace that was no longer forced. She adjusted the lapels of his jacket, then moved to his silk bow tie. With a series of tiny, expert tugs, she centered the knot. She smoothed the fabric over his chest, her palms lingering for a second longer than necessary. Perfect, she whispered, her eyes scanning his face. You finally look like the man I saw in that office. Substantial. Unbreakable. Naruto looked down at her, his breath hitching. Up close, the Ice Queen looked almost fragile in her beauty. So, you're saying I'm actually perfect? Does this mean I get a promotion? Hinata's lips twitched into a small, genuine smile, the one she usually kept hidden in her soundproof jazz room. Do not let it go to your golden head, architect. I said the look is perfect. Your personality remains a work in progress. Naruto's grin softened. He looked at her reflection in the mirror, the powerful, stunning woman standing next to him. You look incredible, Hinata. Truly. Like something that shouldn't be real. A faint, dusty pink crept into Hinata's cheeks. She looked down at his tie, her fingers trembling slightly. Tonight will be difficult, Naruto. My father, the board, they will try to find a crack in us. They will ask questions designed to trip you up. She looked up at him, her lilac eyes searching his blue ones. For the first time, she didn't look like his boss, she looked like his partner. She reached out and took his hand, her grip firm and steady. Do not be nervous, she said softly. You are an architect. You know how to handle pressure. Just remember, you are not standing there alone. I am the spire, and you are the foundation. As long as we are locked together, the structure will not fall. Naruto squeezed her hand back, the warmth of the gesture grounding him instantly. I'm not nervous as long as you're the one leading the way. Just try not to step on my feet this time. Hinata let out a soft, melodic laugh, the kind that built bridges. I make no promises about the dancing, Naruto. But for everything else, I have your back. She reached up one last time, smoothing a stray lock of his hair. The moment stretched between them, thick with a new kind of intimacy that had nothing to do with contracts or books. Let's go, she said, her voice regaining its regal strength. The world is waiting to see the Namikaze Hyuga alliance. Let's give them something they'll never forget. The grand mahogany doors of the Hyuga Namikaze ballroom swung open with a synchronized thud that commanded the attention of every billionaire, diplomat, and socialite in the room. Hinata didn't just walk. She glided, her hand locked into Naruto's arm with the precision of a master architect's drawing. She was a vision of midnight silk, her head held high, projecting a level of regal authority that made the room's temperature drop 5 degrees in respect. Beside her, Naruto looked transformed, the charcoal tuxedo and the midnight mahogany scent masking the ramen-eating peasant underneath. Keep your chin up, architect, Hinata whispered through a fixed, radiant smile. If you slouch now, the shareholders will smell weakness. I'm trying, Hinata, but these shoes cost more than my first office. I feel like I'm walking on glass eggs. As they reached the center of the marble floor, a tall, striking woman with long, flowing brown hair and an air of effortless Parisian chic sashayed toward them. It was Pakura, the world-renowned supermodel from the land of wind, draped in a gown that looked like it was woven from liquid sunset. Hinata, darling. Pakura's voice was like velvet dipped in spice. I haven't seen you since the Tokyo Fashion Week massacre. You look dangerously elegant. Pakura. Hinata inclined her head with a practiced, icy grace. I see the modeling world hasn't managed to dim your penchant for dramatic entrances. Pakura's amber eyes shifted immediately to the man at Hinata's side. Her gaze traveled from Naruto's polished shoes to his golden hair, lingering on his pale, flawless skin, the snow prince complexion that had caused the spa riot earlier. And who is this exquisite piece of structural art? Pakura purred, stepping into Naruto's personal space. She reached out a slender, gloved finger and traced the line of his jaw, her touch lingering on his cheek. His skin is like porcelain. The camera would absolutely worship those angles. She leaned in closer to Naruto, ignoring Hinata's darkening expression. Tell me, handsome, have you ever considered the runway? My agency in Suna is looking for a fresh face. You'd be the star of the autumn collection. Naruto, completely caught off guard by the supermodel's proximity, felt his brain short-circuit. Runway. Like, walking back and forth. Is there? Does it pay well? How much are we talking about per hour? Crack. Hinata's grip on Naruto's hand tightened with the force of a hydraulic press. Naruto let out a muffled whimper of pain as his knuckles ground together. He is not for sale, Pakura, Hinata hissed, her radiant smile turning into a predatory baring of teeth. He is the lead architect of the Namikaze firm, and more importantly, he is my husband. His schedule is entirely booked by my estate. Pakura's eyebrows shot up. She let out a melodic, mocking laugh. Husband. Oh, Hinata, I had no idea you'd finally succumb to the domestic life. I figured you were too cold to ever let a man pass the foyer. Pakura leaned in, her voice dropping to a scandalous, stage whisper that carried just far enough. So tell me, since you've secured the Snow Prince, how is the private life? Have you actually shared a sanctuary with him? How was the performance? I bet with those curves of yours, you kept him occupied all night long. I can see the exhaustion in his eyes. You must have really put those Hyuga assets to work, didn't you? The blush that exploded across Hinata's face was visible even in the dim ballroom lighting. Naruto's jaw dropped so low it nearly hit his silk bow tie. Naruto started, his face turning a chaotic shade of crimson. Yes, Hinata interrupted, her voice suddenly loud and defiant, fueled by a mixture of territorial rage and the need to win the conversation. She pulled Naruto closer, her hands sliding possessively around his waist. We have shared everything. The performance was exceptional. Structurally perfect in every way. My assets were utilized to their fullest extent, and I can assure you, Pakura, he was quite satisfied. Naruto's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He turned to Hinata, his voice a frantic, high-pitched squeak. Wait, Hinata, what are you saying? We haven't even. Before he could finish the sentence and reveal the truth of their invisible border, and separate sleeping arrangements, Hinata's hand flew up, slamming over his mouth with a sharp thwack. Hush, my love, she chirped, her eyes glowing with a warning that promised a very long, very painful lecture later. The architect is so modest. He doesn't like to brag about his endurance. He's much more comfortable with blueprints than shared morsels. Pakura laughed, tapping her chin. Oh, I see. A silent tiger in the boardroom, and a beast in the bedroom. Well played, Hinata. Well played. As Pakura sauntered off to find her next victim, Hinata slowly removed her hand from Naruto's mouth. He gasped for air, looking at her as if she had just confessed to a crime. Hinata, why did you tell her that? We haven't done any of that. You lied to a supermodel. I did not lie, architect. I protected our brand. Hinata hissed, her face still steaming. She was mocking my authority. I had to establish the structural dominance of our marriage. Now, keep your mouth shut and look satisfied. If you tell anyone the truth, I will buy your office and turn it into a facility for testing industrial strength earplugs. But she thinks I'm a beast. Then act like one and stop whining. Here comes my father. The air in the ballroom didn't just chill when Hiashi Hyuga approached, it reached absolute zero. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, leaving Naruto and Hinata standing alone in a spotlight of paternal judgment. Hiashi marched toward them, his traditional dark robes contrasting sharply with the modern tuxedos surrounding him. He stopped 3 feet away, his arms folded into his wide sleeves, his eyes scanning Naruto with the intensity of a building inspector looking for a reason to condemn a skyscraper. Father, Hinata said, her voice dropping into its most formal, guarded tone. She executed a bow so perfect it could have been measured with a protractor. The gala is proceeding according to the projected success metrics. Hiashi ignored her for a moment, his gaze fixed on Naruto's face. He stepped closer, sniffing the air. Midnight mahogany. HMPH. A bold choice for a man who usually smells like a construction site and cheap soy sauce. Naruto gulped, his collar suddenly feeling like a noose. Good evening, Mr. Hyuga. I mean, father-in-law. The mahogany is structurally sound, sir. Hiashi let out a low, gravelly grunt. He looked at Hinata, then back at Naruto, a strange, almost pitying glint appearing in his cold eyes. He leaned in, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial rumble that was loud enough for Hinata to hear every word. Tell me, architect, Hiashi began, his expression as stiff as a stone monument. How are you holding up? I imagine living with my daughter is like living inside a high-security vault with a very short temper. Has she started charging you rent for the air you breathe yet? Or perhaps she has issued a formal decree regarding the exact angle at which you must place your shoes in the foyer. Naruto blinked, stunned by the sudden, man-to-man, honesty. Well, sir, she did mention something about the shoes, and there was a lecture about the pH balance of the dish soap. I knew it, Hiashi sighed, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. She has always been administratively aggressive. I imagine she tortures you daily with her radiant heart, nonsense in her demands for structural perfection. You look like a man who hasn't had a peaceful nap since the wedding ceremony. I am surprised you haven't tried to escape through a ventilation duct yet. Hinata's face went through a breathtaking transition from regal heiress to exploding volcano. Her jaw dropped, and her lilac eyes widened until the veins at her temples began to throb with the fury of 1,000 suns. Father! She shrieked, her voice cracking the crystal glass of a passing waiter's tray. I do not torture him. I am providing him with a framework for excellence. I am a supportive, radiant, and structurally necessary partner. You almost broke my hand earlier, Hinata, Naruto whispered helpfully. Silence, architect, she barked, spinning toward him. I was anchoring you. It was a gesture of territorial affection. Hiashi let out a short, dry bark of laughter, a sound so rare it caused 3 nearby board members to faint in shock. See. Territorial affection. That is Hyuga speak for. I own your soul and your floorboards. My condolences, Naruto. If you ever need a safe house or a lawyer who specializes in domestic tyranny, my office is always open. Father. You are compromising my authority. Hinata fumed, her face a shade of crimson that rivaled the red carpet. She grabbed Naruto's arm, pulling him so close their shoulders collided. He is perfectly happy. He loves the framework. Tell him, Naruto. Tell him you enjoy being managed. Naruto looked at the terrifying, glowing eyes of his wife, then at the stoic, mocking face of her father. He felt like a man standing between a wrecking ball and a skyscraper. It's definitely an experience, sir, Naruto stammered, sweating under the Arctic mist collar. It's very organized. I've never felt more managed in my entire life. It's a 24-hour-a-day project. Spoken like a man under duress, Hiashi nodded solemnly. I shall send you a bottle of very expensive sake. You will need it to survive the post-gala review she is undoubtedly planning. With a final, mocking nod, Hiashi turned and glided away, leaving Hinata vibrating with a rage so intense that her silk gown began to crackle with static electricity. I am going to rewrite the family bylaws. She hissed, her fingers digging into Naruto's tuxedo sleeve. I am going to sue him for defamation. And you? Why didn't you defend my radiance? Why did you agree that I am a domestic tyrant? I was just being honest, Hinata. You literally kicked me off the bed this morning. It was a tactical wake-up call. The gala's grand buffet was a glittering landscape of silver platters, crystal ice sculptures, and hors d'oeuvres that cost more than Naruto's monthly rent. Hinata, still vibrating with the indignation of her father's domestic tyrant comments, decided to deploy the ultimate weapon from the Radiant Heart, the public nourishment protocol. Architect, Hinata whispered, her voice a sharp melody of command. Open your aperture. You require sustenance to maintain your structural integrity for the upcoming toasts. Before Naruto could process the request, Hinata picked up a delicate, gold-leafed blini topped with rare caviar. With a gaze that was simultaneously radiant and terrifyingly intense, she held it to his lips. Eat, she commanded, her face flushing a soft pink. It is a shared morsel of our consolidated bliss. Naruto's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. Hinata, there are 3 CEOs and a Minister of Finance watching us. I can use a fork. I have opposable thumbs. Use your mouth, or I will use my palm to force the issue. She hissed through her perfect, frozen smile. Naruto gingerly took the bite from her fingers. Hiashi, standing a few feet away with a glass of vintage sake, nearly dropped his drink. His daughter, the girl who had treated every suitor like a bug under a microscope, was actually feeding a man. In public, it was a tectonic shift in the Hyuga personality profile. Incredible, Hiashi muttered, a look of genuine shock crossing his stoic face. She hasn't even allowed me to share a salad with her since 2019, yet she treats this boy like a prize stallion. But the domestic peace was shattered by a sharp, rhythmic clicking of heels. Sakura Haruno arrived, wearing a dress that was a scandalous shade of cherry B. Naruto. Darling. Sakura chirped, gliding past the security detail. Before Hinata could raise a defensive barrier, Sakura leaned in and planted 2 loud, exaggerated kisses on Naruto's cheeks. You look absolutely divine in charcoal. It brings out the substance in your eyes. She then turned to Hinata, giving her a shallow, mocking peck on the air near her ear. And Hinata, you look well managed. I see the radiant book is doing wonders for your grip strength. Hinata's eyes began to glow with a violet hue that suggested a localized electrical storm. Sakura, I thought the medical board had revoked your social nuisance license for the evening. Sakura ignored her, turning her full attention back to Naruto. She reached out and smoothed his silk tie, her fingers lingering near his collar. You know, Naruto, if the Hyuga framework ever becomes too restrictive, if the Ice Queen decides to put you in a structural timeout, you should remember that a real woman is always available. One who doesn't require a manual to show affection. I'm quite accessible. Hiyashi let out a sudden, dry laugh. A real woman. It seems the architectural industry is more competitive than the stock market tonight. Father. Hinata barked, her fingers digging into the velvet tablecloth. Sakura let out a melodic, wicked laugh. Oh, don't be so tense, Hinata. Why don't we settle this like civilized women? I've heard your waltz was a bit of a demolition derby earlier today. So, I propose a challenge. A dance-off. You and me. Hinata recoiled. A dance-off. This is a gala, not a street performance. If I win, Sakura smirked, her emerald eyes flashing with malice, I get the next 3 dances with the architect. And I promise, I won't step on his toes. I'll show him what fluid motion really feels like. He is my husband. Hinata shrieked, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. I can dance with him however I wish. I do not need to compete for what I already own. Then prove it, Sakura challenged. Unless you're afraid the spire will fall over without a handbook. This is going to be magnificent. A new, cheerful voice rang out. Hanabi Hyuga, Hinata's younger sister, burst into the circle, a mischievous glint in her eyes. She grabbed a microphone from a nearby podium and tapped it, the feedback squealing through the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, Hanabi shouted, her voice booming over the music. We have a special event. A legendary duel of the divas. My sister, the lady of the manor, versus the flower of the medical district. The prize, a night of dancing with our very own, Snow Prince, architect. Clear the floor. The crowd roared with approval. Shareholders began placing bets. The orchestra shifted into a high-tempo, dramatic tango. Hinata turned to Hanabi, her teeth bared in a snarl. Hanabi, you traitorous, attention-seeking brat. I am going to have your trust fund converted into store credit for a discount hardware shop. Love you too, sis. Hanabi winked, stepping back into the shadows. Now, dance for your man. Hinata looked at Sakura's smug face, then at Naruto's look of pure, unadulterated terror. She straightened her midnight silk gown, her eyes burning with a lethal violet light. Fine, Hinata whispered, her voice cold enough to freeze the champagne. Prepare for a lesson in Hyuga structural dominance, Sakura. I am going to dismantle you on this floor. The orchestra struck a chord so sharp it felt like a structural shear. The ballroom fell into a hungry, expectant silence as the 2 women stepped into the center of the marble floor. Hinata, a pillar of midnight silk, and Sakura, a whirlwind of cherry blossom pink, faced each other like 2 generals before a decisive cavalry charge. The crowd erupted in cheers, champagne glasses raised high, as Hanabi clapped her hands in the background, her eyes sparkling with sibling mischief. Begin the tango of the titans. She shouted. They locked hands, not in a gesture of friendship, but in a grip that threatened to crush metacarpals. As the violin began a low, aggressive thrum, they started to move. To the audience, it was a display of breathtaking synchronicity. To the 2 women, it was a combat zone. You're stiff, Hinata, Sakura whispered, her voice a low, jagged blade as they spun in a tight circle. You dance like you're afraid a single hair will fall out of place. It's pathetic. You're just a spoiled, porcelain doll living in a glass cage. Hinata's eyes flared with violet intensity, her heels clicking against the marble with the force of a hammer. It is called composure, Sakura. Something a common street medic like yourself wouldn't understand. Your movements are loud, desperate, and lack any structural integrity. They pivoted sharply, their faces inches apart, the heat of their mutual loathing radiating through the expensive air. The crowd roared as Sakura dipped Hinata low, her emerald eyes mocking. Does the Snow Prince know how boring you are behind closed doors? Sakura hissed, pulling Hinata back up with a violent jerk. I bet you read him building codes to fall asleep. You probably haven't even performed your basic, marital duties. A man like Naruto needs fire, not a refrigerated heiress. He needs a real woman who can actually handle him, not someone who needs a pink handbook to learn how to hold his hand. Hinata's heart hammered against her ribs, but it wasn't fear, it was a cold, calculated rage. She executed a lightning-fast leg wrap, her silk dress fluttering like a battle flag, and forced Sakura into a dizzying spin that left the pink-haired woman momentarily breathless. My duties are none of your concern, you intrusive interloper, Hinata breathed, her voice a lethal hum near Sakura's ear. I have managed the most complex architectural merger in a decade. Do you truly think I cannot manage a husband? Naruto is not looking for fire that burns out in a night, he is looking for a foundation that lasts a lifetime. And I am that foundation. She leaned in closer, her lilac eyes narrowing until Sakura actually flinched. And as for our private performance, let's just say the architect has never looked more satisfied with his blueprints. If you touch his tie again, I will ensure your medical license is restricted to treating bruised egos in the land of wind. The music reached a crescendo. Hinata seized the lead, her movements becoming fluid, predatory, and undeniably dominant. She swept Sakura across the floor, her power suit and gown working in a symphony of Hyuga dominance that left the audience gasping. Look at them, someone shouted from the balcony. The Lady Hyuga is dismantling her. As the final note crashed, Hinata executed a sharp, final pose, standing tall while Sakura was forced into a submissive dip. The ballroom erupted in a standing ovation. Even Hiyashi, standing by the pillars, nodded once, a sign of ultimate structural approval. Hinata stepped back, smoothing her midnight silk without a single hair out of place. She looked at the panting Sakura with a look of supreme, aristocratic boredom. The dance is over, Sakura, Hinata said, her voice carrying across the silent floor. And the architect remains, exclusively mine. The triumphant music of the tango faded, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like a structural collapse. Standing near the grand arched entrance, bathed in a spotlight of cold moonlight and expensive shadow, was Sasuke Uchiha. He didn't move, he simply existed, his presence sucking the oxygen out of the room. His dark suit was tailored with a lethal precision that made the other businessmen look like they were wearing cardboard. Sasuke. Sakura gasped, her voice trembling, her hands still clutching the fabric of her pink dress. What are you doing here? You weren't on the guest list. Sasuke stepped forward, his boots clicking with a slow, rhythmic finality. He didn't look at the crowd, he looked directly at Sakura with eyes that were as cold as a frozen sea. I am here to witness the pathetic display of a woman who doesn't know when she has lost, Sasuke said, his voice a low, cutting blade. You dance for attention, Sakura. You provoke others because you have no internal foundation of your own. It is performative. It is desperate. Sakura's face went pale. This is none of your business, Sasuke. I was just having fun. It is my business when you use my name to justify your arrogance, Sasuke countered, his expression remaining utterly deadpan. This lack of dignity, this constant need for validation through conflict, is exactly why I divorced you. You have no utility. You provide no structural value to a partnership. You are merely noise. The ballroom gasped. A ripple of cruel whispers broke out among the socialites. Did you hear that? Divorced for being useless. A duchess whispered behind her fan. Typical Haruno, a board member chuckled. All pink and no substance. Sakura's eyes filled with hot, stinging tears. She looked around the room, seeing only the mocking smirks of the elite. She didn't say another word, She simply turned and bolted through the crowd, her heels clicking a frantic, heartbroken rhythm until she disappeared into the night. Bravo, Uchiha! Someone shouted from the back. Well said. Integrity above all. Another cheered, and soon the room was filled with the sound of polite, cruel applause for the man who had just dismantled a woman's heart in public. Naruto stood by the buffet, his hands balled into white-knuckled fists. He looked at the cheering crowd, at the smug face of Sasuke, and at the vultures who were already laughing at Sakura's expense. His blue eyes, usually so bright and warm, darkened with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. This is sick, Naruto muttered, his voice shaking with a quiet rage. They're cheering for that. They're happy she's crying. Hinata moved closer to him, her silk gown rustling. She saw the way he was looking at the guests, the architect's disgust, at a building that was beautiful on the outside but rotting at the core. It is the system, Naruto, Hinata said softly, her voice carrying a weight of centuries of Hyuga tradition. In this world, utility is the only currency. If you are perceived as weak or useless, the structure discards you. It is how the elite maintain their balance. It is cruel, but it is the order of things. Naruto turned to her, his gaze fierce. Then the order is broken, Hinata. I hate it. I hate that people have to be useful, just to be treated like human beings. If this is what being, at the top, looks like, I'd rather be back in the dirt. Hinata looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the man who defended her singing, the man who laughed in the flower, and now, the man who was too good for the gold-plated world she lived in. In a rare, impulsive gesture that ignored every radiant heart, protocol and every command from her father, Hinata stepped into his space. She wrapped her arms around his waist and buried her face against the charcoal wool of his tuxedo, holding him in a tight, protective embrace right in the middle of the crowded ballroom. The room went silent again. The Ice Queen was hugging the peasant, in a display of genuine, unscripted emotion. I know, Hinata whispered against his chest, her eyes closing. I hate it too. But as long as you are the foundation, I can stand the rest of it. Naruto's rage flickered and died, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming warmth. He rested his chin on her head, ignoring the shocked stares of the board of directors. The atmosphere in the ballroom, already strained by Sakura's tearful exit, shifted into something even more surreal. Sasuke didn't follow her. Instead, he adjusted his cuffs and signaled to a woman standing near the champagne fountain. She approached with a stride that made the floorboards feel subservient. It was Temari, the iron-willed strategist from the Land of Wind. She wasn't wearing a gown. She wore a structured, high-fashion tuxedo suit with a golden fan motif embroidered across the back. Her 4 sandy blonde pigtails were sharp enough to be used as weaponry. Naruto, Sasuke said, his voice a flat, architectural drone. Allow me to introduce the new Uchiha asset. Temari. Unlike the previous occupant of the role, she understands the value of a high-functioning partnership. She has utility. She has a spine made of reinforced steel. Temari looked Naruto up and down with the calculating gaze of a general inspecting a foot soldier. She stepped forward and gave his hand a single, bone-crushing shake. So, you're the architect. Hinata has decent taste in raw materials, I suppose. Naruto winced, his fingers throbbing from the handshake. He looked at Sasuke, his blue eyes narrowing with a quiet, smoldering disgust. He didn't say a word, his silence a heavy, structural protest against the way Sakura had been discarded. Sasuke noticed. A cold, mocking smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. I see you didn't approve of the demolition of Sakura's status, Naruto. You've always had a sentimental streak for broken structures. Naruto stayed silent, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like marble. If she occupies so much of your sympathy, Sasuke continued, leaning in with a dry, venomous chuckle, why don't you simply add her to your own household? You could marry her as well. A second wife for the architect. A spare room for the useless one. Sputter. Hinata, who had been taking a dignified sip of sparkling mineral water, suddenly sprayed the liquid across the front of Naruto's charcoal tuxedo in a spectacular, unaristocratic fountain. What? Hinata choked, coughing as she wiped her chin with a silk napkin, her face turning a violent shade of purple. You absolute, structural piece of garbage. Naruto finally exploded, pointing a finger at Sasuke's chest. You think people are just spare parts you can swap out? You're a disgrace to the profession of being a human being. Naruto. Language. Hinata barked, but then she immediately lunged forward, grabbing Naruto's arm and pulling him against her with a grip so tight he turned a slight shade of blue. She glared at Sasuke, her lilac eyes vibrating with territorial fury. He is not marrying anyone else. He belongs exclusively to the Hyuga estate. He is my husband, my associate, and my private property. I will not have your scraps cluttering up my floor plan. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, genuinely taken aback. For the first time, his stoic mask cracked into an expression of pure bewilderment. He looked at Hinata, the woman who usually treated everyone like a business transaction, clinging to the peasant architect as if he were the last gold bar on earth. I am amazed, Sasuke mused, glancing at Temari. The ice queen of the Hyuga, actually showing a possessive reflex. I didn't think you were capable of anything other than a hostile takeover. It is a hostile takeover. Hinata shrieked. And I have completed it. He is mine. Sasuke shrugged, his gaze returning to Naruto with a bored indifference. Suit yourself. I simply thought you might appreciate the variety. Besides, Sakura has significant physical stamina. Her structural strength in the bedroom is quite impressive, even if her personality is a disaster. She could be a heavy-duty addition to your knights. Hinata's eyes went wide. You lecherous, low-budget Uchiha. She screamed, her aristocratic vocabulary failing her. You are a disgrace. Your family tree is a structural hazard. How dare you speak of heavy-duty activities in a ballroom? She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed Naruto by the collar of his suit and began dragging him toward the center of the dance floor. We are leaving this conversation, she declared, her voice booming. We are going to dance, darling. Right now, we will show them a waltz so passionate it will make the Uchiha line look like a pile of rubble. Come, architect. Move your feet or I will move them for you. Wait, Hinata. My shoes are still slippery. The ballroom floor was a vast, unforgiving expanse of polished marble, but as the orchestra transitioned into a swelling, cinematic waltz, the world outside their circle seemed to dissolve into a blur of meaningless gold and shadow. Hinata didn't just lead, she anchored. Her hand was small but firm against Naruto's palm, and her other hand rested on his shoulder with a weight that felt like a silent promise. After the chaos of the buffet, the insults of the Uchiha, and the suffocating expectations of her father, the music was the only thing that made sense. Architect, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sweeping violins. Focus on the center of gravity. Do not look at the board members. Do not look at Sasuke. Look at me. Naruto obeyed. He looked into her lilac eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in the office or the kitchen. He saw a quiet, fierce pride. Despite the invisible borders and the rigid protocols, she was choosing to stand with him against the very world that created her. They moved in a perfect, synchronized orbit. Naruto's feet, usually so prone to structural failure, found a rhythm he didn't know he possessed. The midnight silk of Hinata's gown swirled around his legs like a captured storm, but this time, he didn't trip. He held her close, his hand steady at the small of her back, feeling the warmth of her skin through the fabric. The crowd fell silent. The mockery died away. Even Hiashi stood still, his arms folded, watching as the Ice Queen and the peasant carved a masterpiece out of the air. They weren't just dancing, they were building something, a sanctuary made of motion. As the final, lingering note of the cello began to fade, the momentum of their last spin brought them to a halt near the tall, moonlit windows of the balcony. Naruto was breathing heavily, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Hinata's face was flushed, a few stray dark hairs framing her face, her eyes shimmering with an intensity that made the chandeliers look dim. She didn't pull away. She stayed in the circle of his arms, the cool night air from the open window mingling with the heat of their dance. "You didn't step on me," she murmured, her voice losing its regal edge and becoming the soft, smoky jazz voice he had heard through the bedroom door. "I had a good foundation," Naruto smiled, his blue eyes softening as he looked down at her. "And a very bossy spire." Hinata looked out at the city lights, then back at him. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore, it was full of the secret she had shared. The Snow Prince and the Ice Queen had survived the gala, but the real world, the one with songs and flower and laughter, was waiting for them back at the apartment. She leaned in slightly, her forehead almost touching his. The Radiant Heart handbook was forgotten. Her father's judgment was a mile away. "Naruto," she whispered, her fingers tracing the lapel of his charcoal suit. "When we get back to the soundproof room in the north wing." She paused, a shy but determined light flickering in her eyes. "What would you say if we sang together? Not as a symphony of shared sustenance, but just as us." Naruto's grin was wider and brighter than any spotlight in the room. "I'd say that's the best blueprint I've ever heard, Hinata." The climax of the evening arrived as the music tapered off into a respectful silence. The shimmering chandeliers dimmed slightly, focusing all light onto the grand mahogany podium where Hiashi Hyuga stood. He looked every bit the emperor of industry, his presence commanding a stillness that felt like the heavy air before a summer storm. He adjusted his traditional sleeves, his sharp gaze sweeping over the sea of elite faces, the board members, the foreign investors, and the rivals who had watched his daughter dance with a man they all considered a commoner. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hiashi began, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that didn't need the assistance of the microphone to fill the hall. Tonight was not merely a celebration of a union between two names. It was a demonstration of structural integrity. A marriage, like a skyscraper, is only as strong as its foundation and as ambitious as its design. He paused, glancing toward the balcony where Naruto and Hinata stood, still slightly flushed from their dance. For months, there have been whispers. Doubts about the path the Hyuga estate has chosen. Tonight, those doubts are silenced. It is my distinct honor to officially unveil the future of our skyline, a project that defies conventional limits and redefines the very concept of the urban sanctuary. He signaled to a technician, and a massive, holographic display shimmered into existence behind him. It was a sprawling, golden structure that seemed to rise like a bird from the earth, its glass wings reflecting a simulated sunrise. "I present to you the Phoenix Project," Hiashi declared, his voice rising with a rare note of pride. "The lead architect, Naruto Namikaze, has designed a structure that breathes. And my daughter, Hinata, has ensured its financial and cultural dominance. Together, they have built something that will outlast us all." The room remained silent for a heartbeat, the sheer scale and beauty of the holographic model leaving the billionaires breathless. Then, the silence shattered. A wave of thunderous applause erupted, starting with the board of directors and spreading like wildfire through the ballroom. It was the sound of total, undisputed victory. The shareholders were cheering, the critics were nodding in begrudging respect, and the Snow Prince and the Ice Queen were no longer just a scandal, they were the architects of a new era. Hiashi raised a hand to quiet the crowd, looking directly at Naruto. "Architect, you have proven that the common soil can indeed produce a diamond. Do not let the foundation crack. Naruto nodded, his hand tightening around Hinata's. The applause continued, a rhythmic, booming sound that signaled the end of the gala and the beginning of a legend. The grand gala had ended, the applause was a fading echo, and the heavy holographic displays of the Phoenix Project had been powered down. But instead of the purring luxury of a black limousine, the night air of the city was filled with the rhythmic click of Hinata's designer heels and the scuff of Naruto's leather shoes. Architect. Hinata hissed, her breath hitching as her midnight silk gown caught a stray breeze. This is a structural catastrophe. We are the heads of the most ambitious project in the century, and we are walking home like pedestrians. I have blisters forming on the heels of my feet that feel like miniature volcanoes. Naruto grinned, his hands shoved into the pockets of his expensive tuxedo trousers. The city lights reflected in his blue eyes, making them look like sparkling sapphires. The limo was too stuffy, Hinata. Besides, look at the moon. You can't see the structural beauty of the skyline from behind tinted glass. It's good for your health. My health is currently compromised by these 4-inch hazards. Hinata snapped, stopping under a glowing street lamp. She leaned against a brick wall, lifting one foot and looking at her shoe as if it were a personal enemy. I hate this. I hate the wind. I hate the sidewalk. And I especially hate that you think this is romantic or whimsical. Naruto stopped and looked at her. The moonlight hit her face, illuminating the sharp, elegant lines of her jaw and the deep violet of her eyes. Despite her complaining, she looked breathtaking, a fallen star in a silk dress. Okay, Naruto said, stepping closer. If the spire is leaning, I guess I have to provide some support. Here, get on. He turned his back to her and bent his knees slightly. Get on my back. I'll carry you the rest of the way. It's a standard transport protocol. Hinata's face went from pale to a shade of crimson that rivaled a sunset. Her eyes widened, and she pulled her silk clutch to her chest like a shield. What? You pervert. You want me to wrap my legs around you in the middle of a public thoroughfare? Is this some sort of radiant heart, deviant subchapter I missed? Naruto bolted upright, his own face turning red. No, that's not what I meant. It's a piggyback ride. It's what friends, or, allies, do when one of them has blisters. I'm trying to be helpful, you bossy heiress. Hinata huffed, crossing her arms over her chest, her mind working through the physics of the situation. She looked at his broad shoulders, then at her aching feet. No, that is undignified. If I am to be transported, it will be done with the respect a Hyuga deserves. She stepped forward and pointed at his arms. Carry me, like a princess, or an empress. Your arms are reinforced with the strength of a man who climbs scaffolding all day. Surely you can handle one spire for 3 blocks. Naruto blinked. The bridal carry. Hinata. That's even more public. It is a position of authority. She countered, though her voice was trembling slightly. Now, lift, or I will sue you for breach of domestic comfort. Naruto sighed, a small smile tugging at his lips. He stepped in, sliding one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. With a grunt of effort, he lifted her. Hinata gasped, her silk gown billowing around them as she instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck, her fingers tangling slightly in the hair at the nape of his neck. As they moved through the quiet, moonlit streets, Naruto looked down at her. Up close, without the glare of the ballroom lights, her beauty was overwhelming. The scent of her jasmine perfume was dizzying, and the way the moonlight played across her skin made her look like she was made of silver and silk. Hinata, Naruto whispered, his voice dropping into a low, sincere tone he rarely used. Even when you're complaining and threatening to sue me, you're absolutely stunning. You're the most beautiful thing this city has ever seen. Hinata's breath caught. The Ice Queen defense mechanism short-circuited completely. She looked away, her face burning against his shoulder. Shut up, architect. Your flattery is unrefined and lacks proper aesthetic nuance. You're just saying that so I don't fire you for making me walk. I'm serious, Naruto murmured, his blue eyes locked onto hers. You're radiant, truly. Hinata felt her heart hammering against his chest. She looked back at him, seeing the honesty in his gaze, the look of a man who had seen the foundation of her soul and didn't want to look away. Impulsively, she leaned in. It wasn't a radiant heart maneuver. It wasn't a strategic play. She pressed a soft, lightning-quick kiss to his lips, a feather-light touch that tasted like champagne and jasmine. She pulled back instantly, hiding her face in the crook of his neck, her voice muffled and shy. Fine. You are adequate. Now, let's go home. The Empress is tired of the scenery. Naruto grinned, his heart soaring higher than any skyscraper he had ever designed. Yes, ma'am. The neon lights of the city flickered like dying stars, casting long, jagged shadows against the cold brick of an alleyway just a block from where Naruto and Hinata shared their moonlit moment. In the darkness, a figure stood frozen. Sakura Haruno leaned against a rusted fire escape, her cherry blossom pink dress now stained with the grime of the street, the hem torn and dragging in a puddle of stagnant rainwater. She watched them, the architect and the heiress, moving through the silver light like a scene from a fairy tale she had once believed was hers. She saw the way Hinata's arms were draped around Naruto's neck, the way she looked at him not with the cold calculation of a business partner, but with the soft, vulnerable surrender of a woman in love. Impossible, Sakura hissed, her voice a jagged rasp that tore through the quiet night. She was supposed to be the Ice Queen. She was supposed to be the one trapped in a hollow, structural marriage while I was the one with the real fire. Her fingers dug into the brickwork until her manicured nails cracked and bled. The sight of Hinata's rare, shy smile, the kiss she had just witnessed, burned into Sakura's retinas like acid. She had spent years looking down on Hinata's quiet reserve, convinced that Hinata would never know the heat of a man's genuine devotion. And yet, there it was. Naruto wasn't just carrying a wife, he was carrying his world. A wave of suffocating bitterness rose in Sakura's throat, but it quickly redirected itself toward the man who had discarded her like a faulty blueprint. Sasuke, she whispered, her name for him turning into a curse. She remembered his cold, deadpan eyes as he introduced Temari. She remembered the way he had stripped her of her dignity in front of the very people she had spent her life trying to impress. He hadn't just divorced her, he had tried to erase her existence, calling her useless and a nuisance. The tears that had been threatening to fall finally dried, replaced by a cold, simmering venom. Her emerald eyes, usually so bright, turned dark and predatory. You think I'm just noise, Sasuke? She muttered, her breath hitching in a manic, quiet laugh. You think you can just swap me out for a better asset and walk away? You have no idea what a useless woman is capable of when she has nothing left to lose. She watched as Naruto turned a corner, taking Hinata out of sight, leaving the street empty and cold. Sakura straightened her back, the pain in her heart hardening into a sharp, pointed weapon. Enjoy your structural stability while it lasts, Hinata, Sakura breathed, her gaze turning toward the Uchiha spire in the distance. And Sasuke, prepare yourself. I am going to dismantle everything you've built. I am going to burn your utility to the ground until there is nothing left but ash. She turned away from the light, vanishing into the shadows of the alley, a woman no longer looking for love, but for the perfect point of collapse.